not supposed to be on 40. We're supposed to be on 5. I know, dude. Ah, okay, it's gotta be on 5. It's like our car should also be like one of those, you know, sticking out. Alright, we're gonna have to go down because it's just like we lived through literally the entire 4th floor. And it was like from this type of proximity.
Lost in a parking garage.
We were from this proximity too because it was like a diagonal walk right to the car. Yeah, it was. Thank you. No, you're going down. Can't be because I'm.
No way, I thought it was green.
That's what I thought too. Because we went from an angle walk. This is ridiculous.
It's black, right?
It's dark blue, yeah.
It's right there. What went wrong there, Dave?
San Francisco merchants are so fed up with how they believe parking tickets are hurting business, they decided to hold a little contest. Here's ABC 7's Jonathan Bloom.
I'd rather not relive it, but here we go.
Eric Shaw's parking tale begins on New Year's Eve. He was waiting for a spot next to this Walgreens.
The lady was loading a bunch of stuff from Walgreens into her trunk.
To avoid blocking traffic, he pulled over in this bus zone. He waved at the parking officer who drove by. Then, when the space opened up, he parked and went on his way.
About 2 months later, I get a parking ticket in the mail, and I think it must be some kind of mistake.
But it was no mistake, a $250 ticket for blocking a bus stop. He appealed, but the MTA wouldn't budge.
You shouldn't be stopping in a bus zone at any time. That slows down Muni, which accounts for a lot of the traffic throughout the city.
Shaw won honorable mention in a contest to find the most outrageous parking ticket story. Sophie Constantino was another contestant with 2 tickets in 1 week for overstaying a 2-hour parking zone.
I don't know why I got this ticket.
You moved your car.
I moved my car.
But the MTA told her she didn't move it far enough.
You can't move around the corner. You can't move across the street. You can't move down the block. You actually have to be a complete city block away from where you were originally. Now, that doesn't, these signs, that doesn't say that. It just says, 2-hour parking.
Constantino lost her appeal, but she won the grand prize.
They're going to pay my ticket. I'm very excited.
The small business owners who organized the contest say they're trying to prove a point, that San Francisco's parking enforcement has become so aggressive, it's scaring away their customers.
The minute you walk into the business, he comes back. Within 5 minutes, he get a ticket for $50 or $55 or more.
Grocery store owner Sabi Halim says it makes it hard to compete with stores that have parking lots. But the MTA says they're trying to help small business.
If we didn't enforce these parking spaces, what we would see is people sitting in these parking spaces all day long. And that would mean less traffic for the businesses in the area.
And spokesman Paul Rose adds they've written fewer tickets this year than last. In San Francisco, Jonathan Bloom, ABC 7 News.
Hi, welcome to Park Yourself Here. This is to celebrate International Parking Day. Today, hundreds of cities will take parking spaces, meter parking spaces, and turn it into an interesting, interacting urban park. So this is our idea. we invite people to come in. And as you can see, there's a balloon canopy in a mirror box. So it looks like an endless space of balloons. And we welcome people to take a pen and draw something, write down some messages, and interact with everyone else. So come on in and park yourself here.
Where's the car?
Well, I thought it was here.
You don't know where we parked? This is great.
Look, I thought it was green 22.
I remember orange. I thought it was orange.
I didn't pay attention.
Oh, this is just what I need.
I'm sure it's right around here.
Yeah, it looks familiar. I remember the elevator.
There's elevators all over. Everything looks the same. But like rats in some experiment. It's over there. I know where it is.
It's black, right?
Well, it's dark brown.
So a parking lot, you write it down. How hard is that?
There it is. No. That's a Toyota. I thought it was.
Hey, did we come in over there?
I thought we came in over there.
How long can fish live in one of these plastic bags?
I don't know, maybe 2 hours?
You better find this car.
Let's try this way.
Really have to go to the bathroom.
Good afternoon and welcome. Does anybody remember that Seinfeld episode? It aired 20 years ago, but some things are eternal. Every time I go to the parking garage, I find someone who is fishing by sonar for a vehicle. I'm Matt Oland. I'm a professor in the School of Engineering Education, and this colloquium is the second in a series of annual events called the Interdisciplinary Engineering Colloquium. As you may know, our school is home to undergraduate programs called Multidisciplinary Engineering and Interdisciplinary Engineering Studies, which allows students to earn niche degrees outside of the standard engineering disciplines. It's also home to the first-year engineering program, where we stress interdisciplinary teams and the type that professional engineers work with. Our school also offers a PhD in the discipline of engineering education, which is itself a thoroughly interdisciplinary field of study. And so we think it's very fitting to offer events like this colloquium that bring together different viewpoints, different parts of campus, including engineering, the humanities, social sciences, and, in this case, facilities, as we look into topical subjects. I'd like to take a moment to make some acknowledgments. First, he cannot be with us today, but Professor Bruce Johnson, a Purdue alumnus, very generously provided an endowment for graduate education in the School of Engineering Education. He earned a master's and doctoral degree in mechanical engineering from Purdue. He is a professor emeritus of the U.S. Naval Academy. And so I wanted to let you know that even though he can't be with us today, a portion of his gift to the school funds this colloquium series. I'd also like to acknowledge members of our Industrial Advisory Council who have chosen to avoid the reserved seating in the front row. But they are in the audience today. Would you at least wave, even if you won't be recognized by your seating arrangement? Thank you. We appreciate your service. It's great to have you here. Professor Phil Wankat is the head of our programs in multidisciplinary engineering and interdisciplinary engineering studies. Professor David Radcliffe, at the back, is the Kamyar Hagigi head of the School of Engineering Education, and the colloquium series itself was his brainchild. He is not in the role that I'm in today because he had a very important meeting that he could not skip just before this. We also have with us Dr. Dick Grace. Where did he go? There he is. Thank you for being here. He was the first chair of IDE as well as the first chair of first-year engineering, I believe. In the middle, not the first. Thank you for being here and for the role that you've played in this school. Today we're taking a look at parking and how it intersects with some of the grand challenges facing engineering and indeed all of our society, the energy, the environment, transportation, urbanization, and how our own Purdue history with parking reflects America's culture and our attempt to deal with its manifestations. So we titled this year's colloquium, "Where Did I Leave My Chariot?", which does require some explanation. That is an allusion to a line out of the book Rethinking a Lot, apparently pun intended, by Aaron Ben Joseph, who writes, "Parking has been a problem ever since Julius Caesar banned chariots from downtown Rome. As long as there have been roads, there have been drivers who have needed to park their chariots, carts, wagons, stagecoaches, bicycles, and cars. There have been people who worked hard to come up with effective parking solutions that whole time." When I studied Jonah in the Hebrew Scriptures in college, it was said that Nineveh, the capital of ancient Assyria, took 3 days to walk across. So the result of overuse of transportation methods then may have led, in fact, to what we know as the first parking restrictions that were implemented there around 700 BC, well before the time of Julius Caesar, actually. The Assyrian king Sennacherib didn't want the sacred processional road through the capital city blocked or impeded. So he had parking signs erected that read, "Royal Road, let no man decrease it." The punishment for violating that law? You don't want to know. So as far as the Roman roads are concerned, local rulers in Rome became so fed up with traffic jams in the streets that they decreed the circulation of people should not be hindered by numerous litters and noisy chariots. Julius Caesar himself introduced the first off-street parking laws. During his rule, vehicles such as chariots and large carts were prohibited from entering the commercial districts because of congestion. Special zones or parks were designated for storing vehicles. Today, we find ourselves dealing with the same kinds of issues and some new ones as well. The City of London famously introduced congestion charging a number of years ago, and that was to decrease traffic on city streets and promote public transportation. You have to pay a fee of £10 or so to drive into central London. Closer to home, you may recall a proposal for a multi-story apartment complex here in West Lafayette on Northwestern Avenue. The proposal was defeated recently because parking had not been properly accommodated in that proposal. And Indiana University is making news for considering leasing its parking facilities in Bloomington and Indianapolis to a private operator, an arrangement that would bring in a large upfront payment, but that could make a future emphasis on public transportation somewhat more problematic. So how will the technologies, behaviors, and attitudes around parking and transportation change? And how do we do urban planning, transportation, and parking to accommodate those changes? Our two panelists will take up these questions from two distinct perspectives. Our first panelist is Mary Smith. Mary Smith is the Vice President and Director of Parking Consulting for Walker Parking Consultants. She graduated from Purdue in interdisciplinary engineering with a concentration in architectural engineering, and has since become the world's leading parking planner and functional designer. Mary consults on projects around the world, including, just in the last 3 years, Egypt, Kuwait, Qatar, Russia, China, Korea, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. She is also the co-author of Parking Structures, Planning, Design, Construction, Management, and Repair. Mary will share her global perspective with us on trends in parking and what the future holds. We're very grateful that she's taken time from her latest work assignment in Abu Dhabi to join us for the colloquium. Our second panelist is John Collier, Director of Campus Master Planning at Purdue. John leads the development and implementation of Purdue's Campus Master Plan, which envisions and guides the sustainable development of the university campus. 2 years ago, he collaborated with our school's first-year engineering program on a project called Commuter System 2020, which had students design energy-efficient, user-friendly, futuristic commuter systems for the campus, and he helped with the judging of those projects as well. John will take a look at parking at Purdue over the years and how the campus is expected to adapt and change in the future. By the way, you'll notice that there are pencils and note cards at your seats. If you have a question now or further into the program to ask our panelists, please note it down. We'll collect those toward the end of the program, and we'll get as many of those addressed as possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mary for her presentation. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Matt. I was very pleased to be asked to speak here, but I was kind of shocked. Last year they did 50 years of space, and this year they did parking. But it is a hot topic far beyond development circles. In the upper left, you'll see the book, The High Cost of Free Parking, which is actually a bestseller for the American Planning Association and has done more to affect thoughts about parking in the United States than anything in the last 50 years. And right now, there's an awful lot of people who think parking is the root of all evil in the United States. One of the most recent developments is the US GBC will no longer consider parking facilities for LEED credits. And so you cannot get a parking facility accredited, which I think is short-sighted. I think we should be doing better, more greener things and making them greener. But they've taken that away. And the big complaint is that parking reduces density, and a lot of people literally blame it for sprawl in the United States. And so to kind of look at this issue, Shoup, who's the author of High Cost of Free Parking, calls parking in the United States the great American planning disaster. So I went back and looked at the population density in Cook County, where Chicago is, and Marion County, where Indianapolis is, going back to 1850. Population density meaning persons per square mile. And that's because the density of development also translate directly to the use of transit, the walking, the biking, as well as the price of parking. In other words, a city that has more density generally has higher parking fees than one has slower density. And you'll notice that in 1850, Marion County was actually more dense than Cook County. And really, the curves diverge at the point at which Chicago chose to do heavy rail. And instead, Marion County stuck with buses. And yes, there is a flattening of the curve due to suburbanization after 1950 when the cars actually became ubiquitous. But the reality is that density was preordained when cities chose between rail transit or continued with streetcar and bus. I'm going to talk today about two different things. I want to thank Matt for not telling everybody that I graduated in 1974, but the point is that parking has changed a lot more in the last 10 years than it has in my first 30 years. And I'm a lifer at Walker, straight out of Purdue. I went to work for them. And technology is changing parking even more, even faster every year. So we're going to kind of touch on those two topics. And I'm going to kind of juxtapose the old paradigm and the new paradigm in these slides. I do a lot of work on car sizes and how they impact parking dimensions. And up until a couple years ago, I said, Americans love their cars. They will never change. They're always going to buy the biggest car that is justified by either their lifestyle or their income. And today, the millennials want smart cars, urban life, smartphones and urban life, and they don't really want cars. I have 3 children, 2 of which are Purdue graduates, and none of them walks to work. There's another significant demographic, and there's kind of a barbell effect when anybody talks about demographics these days. You have the baby boomers and you have the millennials. And this is a study that I love the title, Aging in Place, Stuck Without Options. And the conclusion is that the vast majority of baby boomers want to stay in their home until they pass away. They don't want to have to go anywhere. And 15.5 million over 65 live in areas with little or no transit. That's 80% of the baby boomers in the country. And the recommendations of this is we've got to fund more and subsidize more transit, and we have to improve walkability to transit. Well, I was dealing in the last couple of years with my 90-year-old father who actually drove on his 90th birthday and shouldn't have been, but we finally had to move him right after that into assisted living. And he could not walk a block to transit at that point in his life. And I think one of the biggest things in sprawl is that the American dream was to live in the biggest house with the biggest yard you can afford. So that is what fed suburbanization. And it was followed by shopping to the suburbs. And then it was followed by offices and jobs to the suburbs. This is where the Sears Corporation moved when they moved out of Sears Tower out to the suburbs in the 1980s. And a lot of people call this kind of development chickenpox development because it just kind of pops up all over the place. And today, there's so much more emphasis and so much more interest in urban living, the live, work, play, whether it's in downtown Chicago, downtown Indianapolis, or even downtown Carmel. And I'm going to talk a little more later about some ideas about the West Lafayette zoning controversies, but those were really what most people call smart growth, because they would live, work, play environments near the campus instead of building new housing out in some cornfield somewhere where people had to drive to it and put the retail out there where they had to drive out to it. And I think that what I was reading in the papers was that the city really thought that was a good project, But the problem was they just couldn't get the number of parking spaces required into the mass of that building without having the height go too high to meet the height restrictions. So it was the project died. I'm going to talk about a smart growth project in Qatar that I've been working on for the last 3 years. Qatar is that Michigan-shaped country that sticks into the Persian Gulf. It's one of the oil nations. It has the fastest growing country in the world, both in terms of population and GDP. And actually that's because it has the greatest resources of natural gas in the world, not the normal oil. And Doha is the capital. It's right in the thumb area of the country. In 1947, Doha was a fishing village, and their only real income with the outside world was from pearl hunting and trading with Japan. And today, we're doing a project in downtown Doha. Now, you'll see on the very top of the slide, I'll talk a little more about the Bilbo effect, but you'll see the kind of high-rise development you see in most of the rest of the Middle East. Dubai particularly has miles and miles and miles of high-rise after high-rise after high-rise after high-rise. Another feature of all the Arab states that are on the Gulf is the Corniche, which is a linear park they develop. It's really a wonderful experience. And the whole, anywhere the city is touching the ocean, they have this Corniche. And it's a wonderful experience. And there's also the Souk Waqif, and I'll show you a picture there in a minute. But that's the old souk. That's the original old souk where the traders were trading in the pearls and the fish. And this particular project happens to be across the street from really what you can think of as the Qatar White House. Right where the arrow points is the Emir's palace, and that little building next to it is the executive office building like you would see in New York. And this is, they've leveled a large area of downtown Doha, and they're putting up 26 blocks of buildings in a single cohesive new downtown for Doha. And it's a podium at street level under which there are 10,000 parking spaces. And it would have needed about 18 if we didn't use shared parking and various other techniques, including the fact that there's a new metro station under that corner that's closest to us in the picture. That's the hub of the whole new metro system that's going into Doha. And they're trying to get that done in time for the World Cup in 2022. And between now and then, Doha has to build 80,000 hotel rooms, not to mention the other things they have to build. So it's a very active community. And I mentioned the Bilbo effect, and that is that celebrity architects doing great buildings can draw people to a community. Actually, one of the really earlier models was the Sydney Opera House in Australia. But all through the Middle East, you are seeing these iconic towers being built. And the other thing you'll see in this picture is all the tower cranes. And that really is true. There are more tower cranes in any vision in those kinds of areas. But the Emir and his wife, the Sheikha, decided they weren't going to do that in downtown Doha. And this is the Souk Waqif, which instead of tearing it down and redoing it because it was falling apart, they rebuilt it stick by stick to exactly match what was there before. They just did it with updated techniques. And so it's got these little warrens that go down the hall, and you go down one hall of these little corridors, and it's the bird souk. And there are thousands of birds and falcons and all kinds of things. You go down another one, it's clothes. Another one is just spices, where you walk down that hallway, and it's the most incredible smells imaginable. These are my first two parking structures, and we're going to talk here a little bit about architecture. On the top, I apologize for the quality of the pictures. We had to use Google Earth because we don't keep pictures of these anymore. And the bottom one is the 1968 University Avenue garage here, which my company did. It was one of our various first projects after we were founded. And this is a parking structure that's in Miami Beach. It's actually in South Beach. It's, the developer lives on top of it, and it is such a hot architectural statement that people do weddings on the top floor of the parking deck. Now, a typical parking structure right now built on this campus might come in about $20,000 a space. This parking garage costs $200,000 a parking space. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They should have put the 300 spaces underground and put a building on it that really was something that contributed to the life of the city. But they wanted to make a statement about the architecture of parking garages. We'll switch a little bit to the old paradigm. You know, parking should be free. Parking should be a service. We should only charge just enough to cover our expenses. And particularly at universities and hospitals, it should be below market and subsidized to attract and retain employees. And the green paradigm is that parking should be paid in order that users make wiser mode choices. And this is really a critical shift that's happening in the industry right now. And to help you get an understanding of that, I've calculated the monthly cost to own, finance, and operate a newly built parking structure in Indiana in 2012. Now, this is without paying any land costs, so that I've taken that out of it because that's very variable. So if a new lot was built on campus, you should be paying $30 a month to pay for that parking space. And if a new above-ground deck is built, it's about $135. And of course, everybody keeps saying, well, we should put a big parking garage under the mall, and that would take $260 a month to pay for. So it's very expensive to build these underground garages. In municipal parking in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the cities intervened in the market to build parking to save and redevelop downtowns. They did it at Wabash Landing here. In the 50s and 60s, Chicago built 14 garages. In the 90s and the aughts, it transitioned to public-private partnerships, which meant that the city builds and subsidizes parking in order to get new development to come down here, town. Now, what has happened with the city controlling parking rates is that they are politicized, and they rise way, way, way too slowly because you go down, and the same thing happens on the campus. You go down and complain because they're raising your parking rates. And so the 2010 paradigm is privatization. And Chicago first did their off-street, their 4 remaining off-street garages. The fees went up overnight to double to market rates because they were half of the market rates, and nobody really said too much. So then they did their on-street meters. There were 36,000 meters, and the rates had not been raised in over 20 years. And at the time, you could park in the loop for $3 an hour on a meter, and right next to it would be a parking garage, and that first hour would be $10 to $20. That's how much they were below what the market was in the loop. And today, there's all this fuss because they've raised the meter rates for the loop to $5.75. And it's still not even close to being at market rates. Indianapolis has privatized their meters on much better terms. There's some other problems. I'm not going to go into all the history of that. Ohio State just cut a deal to privatize their whole parking system, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. As Matt mentioned, Indiana University is exploring privatizing, and I imagine with our man Mitch, there's a pretty good chance they're going to privatize parking on the university. The Ohio State system had 36,000 spaces. Their permits were $100 for remote parking and $750 a year for the garages. It's a little bit more than the Purdue folks are paying. And they have received, as part of this lease for 50 years, they've received $485 million up front to OSU. And that's going to spit off, it's going to be in an endowment, and that's going to spit off $60 million per year. And it's dedicated to funding academics. It's going to fund building maintenance. I understand there's a little problem with some deferred building maintenance on this campus. And they have a separate transportation system. They don't use the city bus, and it will fund over that 50 years, it will completely fund that transportation system, so it's free to the users. And there is a clause in it that says the parking rates can only increase a maximum of 5.5% per year for the first 10 years. I want to talk just a little bit about technology. And one of the points is that European technology is typically way ahead of us. And an example is Pay on Foot, which is the payment system that's at the Union Garage. Purdue was actually an early adopter of that system, but it was being used almost exclusively in Europe 20 years earlier. It took that long for that system to come to the United States. And the other thing I'm going to point out, I'm going to talk a little about, is leapfrog. When a system finally starts to take hold, other technology seems to be leapfrogging it before we can even get the first technology widespread. And so we're seeing a lot of parking availability displays where we count how many cars are parked, and we help people make wiser decisions on where they're going to park. But this is a system that's going into every one of my garages in the Middle East. It's not very common in the States yet. And there's a sensor over every parking stall, which gives us more accurate counts instead of trying to count by loops. And when you look down the aisle, you can see that there's green lights and know that there's spaces available down that aisle and make a wiser decision to circulate that aisle. And of course, we saw the Seinfeld thing, and there's been strategies for a long time about helping people find their car. But it's about to be leapfrogged by Wi-Fi systems, and this particular one called Wi-Fi would be an app that's on your smartphone. You get out of your car and you hit a button, and it will triangulate between 3 Wi-Fi repeaters on the floor and tell you know exactly where your car is. Then you hit the button for Nordstrom's, and you can give you turn-by-turn directions to Nordstrom's. Then you hit the button, say restaurants. It'll give you choices for lunch, give you coupons, give you advertisements. And then when you're done having lunch, you hit a button, and it gives you turn-by-turn directions back to your car. Robotic parking, and I got to be careful because robotic actually is a trade name, but it's easier to say than automated mechanical parking facilities. And it's very hot. I don't know how many people sent me this picture about 7 years ago when it was circulating the internet. Have you ever seen this? Isn't this cool? It's actually not a parking garage. It's at the Volkswagen factory, and that's how they deliver your car to you when you buy a car and pick it up at the factory. But it is pretty glitzy. And they are starting to come to the United States. Again, they are all over Europe and Japan. And you drive into a portal, you put your car in there, you get out, and they whisk your car away and park it. And of course, everybody thinks this is so great, and you see all the urban planners saying this is the future of parking in downtowns. And it costs about 50% more per parking space to do this. And you can only do it for very low turnover. So you can only do it for like residential. You can't do it for retail. You can't even do it for office with the tidal flow in and the tidal flow out. So the only thing it really works for is residential. But this would have been a solution to this West Lafayette project. Because the mass is much left, they could have gotten more spaces in if they could afford to pay 50% more per space, but they could have gotten more spaces in it, and it works very well for residential. So that might have saved that project. Everybody's all excited about electric cars and recharging and things. I thought maybe there would be some resonance of a study by the National Academy of Sciences here on the campus. Their realistic projection for plug-ins in 2030 is 13 million on the road. That sounds pretty good. It's only 5% of the vehicles that will be on the road in 2030. And the only way we're going to get to that number is by subsidizing every single purchase, like we do today with a $7,500 tax credit. Further, they concluded that plug-in and full electric vehicles will not impact oil consumption or carbon emissions before 2030. And so they're not actually green at all, especially in the Midwest. The one place they are green is in the Northwest, where they use hydroelectric power that's cleaner. But the bottom line is electric vehicles should be recharged at home at night. They should not be charged at work unless you have a range problem. An individual has a range problem, they need it because they can't get home again. And they certainly should not be recharged while shopping. And then what's going to happen by 2020, everybody says hydrogen fuel cells may be completely adoptable, and the only thing really holding them back is the gas stations to recharge the tanks. But then just this week, there was an article in The Economist that they're actually now saying that nitrogen is going to leapfrog hydrogen fuel cells, and everybody now thinks that's the future, rather than either electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cells. And there are other game changers out there. One is personal rapid transit. There's a city in Abu Dhabi right near where I'm living right now. And they have these individual cars that it's on a guardrail, it's on a rail, but it's on demand and it's nonstop to your destination. So you get in this little pod and you have the menu and you pick the place you want to go, and it goes nonstop to that destination. But it's still pre-programmed stations. But KPMG came out with a study this summer talking about how close we are to having driverless cars, and how the future of those vehicles should be telematics, which operate like subscription taxi service. So it's a Zipcar model, but driverless. So what does that kind of mean? Well, first of all, the federal government is financing a lot of this research because they want crashless cars that cannot possibly crash because the car knows it's going to be hit and it diverts. And by 2020, they're saying that this technology will be available on vehicles, and you can platoon cars very close together down the freeway at high speeds, and because you're not subject to the first guy tapping his brake, the next guy hitting it harder, the next guy hitting it harder, and it pulls to a stop. So this platooning will solve significant congestion problems. However, they're saying by 2025, there will be subscription driverless taxis. So the young urban dwellers can text and drive safely. The commuters can, it's very similar experience to rail, because you can work and relax and read, but it's door to door, so you get to overcome that problem with rail transit or bus transit. And the aging baby boomers like my father would be able to retain their independence because they would make an appointment, the taxi would come and get him and take him to the doctor and take him to the grocery store, rather than him being forced to drive himself. And it certainly solves that problem that was in that other study of saying, let's do mass transit for these elderly people, because that's certainly not going to work for most of that population. I want to thank you for your attention. This is a study, an award-winning project at MIT. It wasn't necessarily for vehicles, but this team came up with these vehicles that can be stacked when they're parked. And it was particularly set up for like a Zipcar model. So I can see this merging with the driverless cars. And if you ever want to do it, there's a really neat video on YouTube. So if you just do the MIT smart cars, smart cities, you can watch the video, the people pulling up and parking this and getting out of the car. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Of course, everyone did see except for John. Here you go, John. There you go. Thank you very much, Mary. As we move into John's presentation, we'll look at some campus history from some Purdue newsreels. Please enjoy.
Just west of the Union and surrounding the old library on the south and west sides, the elegant new Memorial Center is being completed for its opening in the spring of 1958. The old oval had a complete facelifting and now shows attractive crosswalks and beautiful landscaping. When winter is gone, everybody wants to relax the tensions built up by a strenuous school year. These students organized a tricycle race around the circle in front of the executive building. The tricycles were built by various units of men's residence halls from old parts, and they frequently show quite unconventional design. Everybody has a great time, so it seems.
Just as its students, faculty, and staff are changing, adapting, and growing, so too is the face of this 120-year-old institution we know as Purdue University. And the year 1989 saw more changes than perhaps any time in our history. The building program included some 50 projects totaling $45 million. This construction included completion of a new campus centerpiece, which President Stephen Bering talked about when he addressed alumni homecoming weekend.
It is one of the most exciting periods of Purdue history indeed. By now I hope you have seen the beautiful quadrangle we promised you last year, which used to be called Engineering Mall, and have taken in the water sculpture which we dedicated just this morning, which represents the magnanimous gift of the class of 1939. The sculpture and the park around it have drawn students, staff, and visitors from all over ever since we began to put the first pieces into the ground.
Parade ended with dedication ceremonies for Founders Park, the newly landscaped area behind University Hall. A plaque was unveiled bearing the names of 43 founders who helped shape Purdue.
Normally, we honor John Purdue with our walk to his grave and a ceremony at the John Purdue gravesite. Today, we have an opportunity to not only honor John Purdue, but the countless men and women, the founders that shared his dream.
The new Grant Street parking garage was finished in time for fall semester. It has almost 1,500 parking spaces, which more than doubles its old capacity. The newest green space on campus, Academy Park, honors Purdue's greatest teachers by emulating Plato's Academy of Ancient Greece.
Come, take up the body!
The park was dedicated during a Gala Week ceremony.
We thought, therefore, that we would call it Academy Park after that first teaching institution and after what we now consider the academy, which is the teaching and learning enterprise that makes up a university.
I think that's it. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Matt, for the nice introduction. And I want to also thank Dr. David Radcliffe and the School of Engineering Education for the opportunity to share this with you. Also, especially a big thank you to Lisa Talley and Becky Fry for all your help in putting this whole thing together. And Mary, your presentation was fantastic, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the course of this this little endeavor that we've both agreed to take on. I'm John Collier, and I'm here to talk about where I left my chariot on the Purdue campus. Actually, I'm here to talk more specifically about parking and the greening of the campus, because parking has had an enormous impact on this campus over the years, and so that's what I want to chat about. But first, I have to kind of back up about 9 decades and tell the story about Purdue. This is an image of Purdue from 1924, and just to get you oriented, here's State Street, in case anyone's confused. This is the Union, so Grant Street is right over here. That's where we are. Campus was about 55 years old at that time. It consisted of about 35 buildings, and there were about 3,500 students on campus in 1924. Campus had beautiful tree-lined streets that you can see, the beautiful grove of elms around the Memorial Mall. Just to get you oriented again, there's University Hall. Actually, even public transit was an integral part of the campus at that time. If you zoom in on that image, that's actually a trolley coming up State Street. So a parking space wasn't even thought of at that time. And what actually drove, this new stadium had just been completed at the very north end of campus, the stadium that we all still know today, the Ross-Ade Stadium. And that actually was the catalyst for the very first master plan at the university. Back in 1924, David Ross, who was a member of the Board of Trustees at the time and also half of the donor of the Ross-Ade Stadium, felt that the stadium was too far removed from the main academic campus. And at that time, if you saw in those images, the northernmost building on campus was the Armory. And so there was this great divide between the campus and the stadium, and so they wanted a master plan. So at that time, this plan was developed, which actually established a boulevard drive right through the middle of campus, as you see here, on which there was actually parallel parking on both sides of those drives all the way through the main campus. You can see this image by the mid-1940s. This is actually about 1942 or 43. The stadium was done. Cary Hall was now complete. You can still see the Boulevard Drive connecting it down to the main academic campus, but still not a whole lot of development in between. So this plan was all about creating a connected campus. And it's interesting also from this perspective, looking from the south to the north, you can see all the great, beautiful green spaces that existed on the campus in between all of these great buildings that had developed over those 55 years or so. Interestingly, it's in this time in the mid-40s when I saw on a campus map anyway, for the first time, an actual designated parking lot, not just on-street parking. So that's the first time that we actually see parking. Then something happened. There was the end of the World War II. So as a result, there were lots of GIs that came back to the United States, and there was the GI Bill that encouraged many of them to come to study at universities, and Purdue was no exception to that. In fact, the university population in about the mid-1940s, or maybe 42 or 43, was somewhere around 7,000 students. And by 1950, just a few short years later, it was up to almost 15,000 students. So that shows that peak right there after World War II. And then what happened was this great love affair began between humans and their automobiles, especially, or particularly Americans and their automobiles in the United States. And it wasn't something that just happened here. It happened everywhere. Look at this aerial photograph of downtown Houston. I mean, just blocks and blocks of nothing but surface parking. And Purdue was no exception to that concept as well. All of those great, beautiful green spaces that we had on our campus back in the 1920s all disappeared, almost all disappeared to make way for surface parking. And here's an aerial photograph of campus from about I think it's about 1968, because both Heine Hall is under construction and the accelerator facility as well. But look at all the parking on street along those boulevard drives that are part of that campus spine that Walter Scholler established, all around the Hall of Music and just on the east side of what was then the Memorial Gymnasium. The Purdue Mall, if there hadn't been a construction project, you'd see parking on both sides of the mall, right up to the front door of Hovde Hall. Back behind University Hall on what is now Founders Park, and that you saw in some of those newsreels, the area that's now Academy Park, immediately north of the Stewart Center and the Union, was one giant parking lot that extended from Memorial Mall all the way to the Union Club Hotel. Across the street, across Northwestern Avenue, prior to the construction of the Northwestern Avenue parking garage, there was a large surface parking lot there as well. And also the area on what is now Potter was largely a parking lot. So every open space that existed on the campus in the 1920s disappeared to accommodate parking. That was the priority then. That's the way it was. It wasn't considered, I don't think, I wasn't there then, but my sense was that was just what was expected, that parking was critical and you had to have it right outside your building. Also, all the areas behind Creative Arts were right where this building is today. So in 1986, 20 years after that photograph was taken, Dr. Beering actually initiated a new campus master plan that actually was focused on trying to get the campus back to what it had been in the 1920s, which was a great conglomeration of buildings surrounded by great green space. And so since then, this is an aerial photograph of the campus in about 1983 or 80. Actually, it's before 83 because Michael Golden Labs is still in the photo here, and Conoy went up in 1983. But you can, again, see all of that surface parking in that area. And so this master plan was all about moving parking to the periphery of the campus and then getting those parking lots converted back to green space. As was the perfect example was the Purdue Mall. One of the first projects right out of the bat after the master plan in 1986. By 1989, this is what the Purdue Mall looked like. After the development of the MSEE building in the foreground, which was, of course, very controversial for those of us who were on campus at the time. But the fact was the parking space, whoa, went crazy here, was the parking all disappeared. So a before and after shot of the old Purdue Mall in front of Hovde Hall, before and after, huge transformation, the exact same view. This is the view of the walk from Northwestern Avenue down to Hovde Hall with physics on the right and chemical engineering or Forney Hall also. There's this, oh, I keep touching the mouse pad, that's the problem. Let me go back. That's the same view after the renovation. That this progress just continued after the Purdue Mall project. There were a handful of others. Founders Park, which you saw on the newsreel, is one, which was then followed quickly by Academy Park as well. But look at the transformation. This is the oldest building on Purdue's campus, the back of it that you see right here on the right, on my right, I guess you're right too, with University Hall. You'd walk 10 steps outside of University Hall and you were in a parking lot. It's unimaginable today, I think, to imagine that that was the way it was, but that's how it was. There's the exact same view today. And again, you can't see much, but there's a giant tree right in the foreground. That, to me, spells success. This one, I think, says it all. This is looking to the southeast at the back of Stone Hall. Not a great picture, but you know the parking lot was there. Here is the exact same view after that transformation of that space. So again, from parking to a beautiful green space. Even on a cold, miserable day in January, even when the whole space is barren, it's still an improvement in my mind over what it had been. There's the exact view back in the 1960s. Academy Park, as I said, came right after that. Again, one of our largest surface parking lots on campus, immediately north of the Union and Stewart Center, in one of the most heavily traveled pedestrian areas on campus. And students walk through that space multiple times a day, myself included. And after 1996, when this project was done, the transformation was significant, and that allowed us to create a space for outdoor gathering, classes, performances, and people use it. This is, to me, says it all as well. The view looking from Memorial Mall straight east back towards University Church. Hevelin Hall is on the left, the Union in the background. There's my 1976 Ford Pinto. Look at that. That was the view right in the heart of the academic campus, and here is the exact same view today. There's still a mode of transportation that we're accommodating, but it's bicycle instead of vehicle in this case. So in 2009, the university engaged Sasaki Associates in conjunction with Scholler Corporation to actually develop a new master plan for the university. So there were 5 big ideas that came about as a result of this plan. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm only going to mention a couple of them. But the whole goal was basically about maintaining a compact academic campus core and also maintaining the 10-minute class break. Downgrading State Street to function as a collaborative and vibrant center instead of this horrible dividing feature that it's been for years. Encouraging mixed-use development that supports program synergies. That's consistent with the new synergy strategic plan that was established in 2008. And supporting a more integrated and intuitive transportation system around and throughout the campus. And then finally was preserving the western lands. So I'm going to talk about 2. One is establishing State Street as a collaborative zone because it's so integral to everything that we're striving to do on the campus today. Once US 231 is finished in September of 2013, and that's the new bypass that's being built south and west of campus, State Road 26 will be diverted onto that corridor, which means State Street will revert back to local control. We'll have the opportunity to work with the city and the county to downgrade it and really embrace it as our center. So that it becomes a very active and vibrant place after the last class bell rings at 5:20 in the afternoon, instead of the dead zone that it in essence is today. The whole point is to encourage mixed-use development along that corridor with lots of activity into the evening hours, with first-floor transparency that allows to keep as many eyes on the street as possible. And when you do that, when you allow people to see in and you're in a building and you can see out, it's a much safer environment for pedestrians and all those walking up and down the street. The second big idea that I wanted to share from the master plan was this whole concept of encouraging a simple integrated transportation system with a perimeter parkway. So the whole concept here is to just try to create a more intuitive transportation system. Right now we have a whole series of very confusing one-way streets around campus. Our hope, if we can work with the city and the county, is to try to encourage more simple two-way streets in most of those areas and move the traffic that currently runs right through the middle of the campus on State Street onto a parkway around the campus. In doing that, then, that allows us to move parking closer to the periphery as well, which is what we've really been doing since the 1980s. Some things that will tie into that are the incorporation of trying to provide more connectedness on the bicycle trail system that we have on campus, and tying those into a lot of the city and community trails that already exist. We think that the most successful transportation systems are those that provide options, not that require everybody to take one mode of transportation. So if you provide bicycle paths and the infrastructure that goes with that, then we hope more will choose to ride that as a primary means of transportation instead of a secondary. Another thing that's had a huge impact on transportation on campus at will is this US 231 that I mentioned. It's what you see highlighted in the bright colored corridor, and how that ties in with this concept of the new perimeter parkway around the campus. If the parkway is successful in the long run, it's going to take us many years to get it implemented because it, so far anyway, requires federal funding that obviously is not all that available today. But we have to provide an alternative for people to get around the campus instead of through State Street. State Street, we still want to be a simple two-way street, but we hope that the people who are coming to Purdue as the destination, that they'll find their way to their destination by using the Parkway instead. We've had a lot of impacts as a result of some new development that's occurring in the South Academic Campus. This map simply shows in red the parking that has been displaced as a result of the new US 231, the Perimeter Parkway, and the new development that's actually occurring now as part of what we're calling the Life and Health Sciences Park on the South Academic Campus. Here's State Street. Well, let me just click. This shows the boundary of that, Jiskey to University, State to Harrison. You can see the sea of surface parking in that district and what had historically been lots of one-story service buildings that we've been moving down to the area south of the railroad tracks in what we call the South Campus Complex. Once those buildings start disappearing, which they're already on their way down now, we'll actually see a whole transformation of this area for a future expansion of the academic campus. And so there are actually four buildings under construction now. The replacement for Herrick Labs is number 1. The new Lyles Porter Hall for Health and Human Sciences is 2. A new drug discovery facility is 3. And then a new 850 space parking garage to replace the loss of the 850 surface lot spaces in that area. Here are some images of those buildings that are going up right now. You just see a construction fence and a lot of construction equipment right now, but eventually it's going to be a whole new academic district on the campus. So moving parking to the perimeter of the campus is something we've been working on since the 1980s, and this map shows where each of those major parking facilities are right now. These are both parking garages and major surface parking lots. The circles that are around them indicate the 5-minute walk circle that we have. We strive to not make anybody walk farther than 5 minutes from their parking space to their destination for faculty and staff. And so you can see we've got the academic campus covered fairly well. The yellow building that you see down here is actually the new Harrison Street garage that's under construction now. If you're wondering why there's this big void out here, it's because permit parking is separate from university residences parking, and so they're managed separately, and that's not really reflected here other than this large McCutcheon Drive parking garage here on the west. We have established a whole handful of midterm parking recommendations, most of which are underway, some are completed or are in the planning stages now. Building a new garage for the Life and Health Sciences Park, which is that new Harrison Street parking garage, is under construction now. Ultimately, like in the next 4 years or so, the Marsteller Street garage will be coming down. It's at the end of its useful life, and we have to then figure out what we do in lieu of that. We wanted to maximize parking in and around Rec Sports. That parking lot is under construction now. We want to provide some convenient parking for visitors and guests to the Discovery Park complex. We provided that. Some of it has disappeared again as a result of the new construction, but we also have another lot under construction there as well. We ultimately we had on this list the goal to pave the lot north of Elliott. That's done. And then finally, we say we want to monitor the northwestern garage uses to determine if the oldest wing of that building will need to be replaced at some point in the future. My hope is that by the time we get there, our culture will have changed so much with regard to parking, or some of this new technology that Mary talked about will have been implemented at Purdue, that we may not even need that new replacement garage. Just as those garages and the parking lots have gone up, we know parking is a critical component of the campus. It's always going to be a part of our campus, at least for the foreseeable future. But it also has caused lots of problems, as I mentioned, the destruction of the green space. It also creates a lot of surface stormwater runoff that we have to address. We're federally mandated to try to control stormwater. And so we've made some great efforts in trying to reduce stormwater runoff on a lot of our surface lots. Here's the old view of the Armory parking lot, and here is the exact same view after the renovation just a few years ago. All of these planted beds, or most of them anyway, function to capture stormwater. There's pervious pavement throughout that area to also try to reduce the amount of runoff in that district. The stadium parking lot north of the stadium, the largest surface parking lot on our campus, was just nothing but a sea of asphalt until just a year or so ago. You can see here what it used to look like. Actually, this dark pavement that you see in that screen is actually pervious pavement. So that's helping that whole surface runoff issue. Recently, we put in the bioswales and a whole series of rain gardens and planters in that area. So that lot has completely been transformed to now. You can see the Chariot looking for its parking space. There are other options available for trying to reduce the amount of parking demand on campus. Now, I doubt we're going to go back to horse and buggy, but it is an option. Some others are increased and enhanced bicycle infrastructure. We've worked hard for the last 10, 15 years to provide more and better parking available adjacent to drives and or parking or bike paths where we want bicycles. It's a very difficult task to separate pedestrians and bicycles. Any of our peer institutions you've talked to, they were all just here this couple of weeks ago, and I tell you, we all have the same problems with regard to bicycle and pedestrian issues. We want to work hard to try to provide more connectedness between our existing bike trail system. We have a whole handful of projects on our list of projects currently aren't funded, but we're seeking funds for some of these to try to provide that connectivity that's so important for encouraging more folks to choose to ride bicycles on campus. Zipcar, that was implemented, a year or two ago, has been, I think, a big success. I think right now we're up to 6 vehicles in 4 different sites, and my understanding is that they're used quite heavily, and it's you pay a fee and you don't then have to pay for gas or insurance. You just, I think, swipe and go. And so a lot of our students I know are taking advantage of this. City Bus, we would be lost without City Bus. We implemented the free ride program, the Ride for Free program at Purdue in 1998. And since then, it's just gotten bigger and bigger. And I think, John, correct me if I'm wrong, in 2010, there were, City Bus provided 5 million rides in Tippecanoe County, and I would venture to say that the majority of those rides were as a result of the Purdue campus loops. And so that's amazing. Our students have completely embraced that. We need to work harder now to get faculty and staff to choose to do that too. We have long-range plans for, again, making State Street a much more pedestrian-friendly street, implementing what we call complete street strategies, where you actually accommodate all modes of transportation, not just the vehicle, but bikes, transit, pedestrians, and cars. Northwestern Avenue, the hope is to try to incorporate some of those changes as well. So really, we've come a long, long way. This is the Stadium Mall when I was a student here in the 1980s. That's what it looked like walking south. The Purdue Student Hospital is right here on your right. These are the old Creative Arts building, which is exactly where this building is today. So that was the view back in 1977. Here is that same view today. So we've come a long way, and I did a quick little study here that I want to share with you. I did a whole series of figure ground studies where I actually show just black and white images of campus buildings and then the rest of the space from the campus in 1943. On the left you see. The yellow that you see on the right side is actually the amount of parking that was on the campus in 1943. All right, so there's that. Let's fast forward 30 years to 1973. The campus obviously has grown, but look at the amount of surface parking on the campus. How much of that space is consolidated in the North and South Academic campus. It's unbelievable. And it only gets worse. In 1983, it just continued. The only space that we lost for parking was because we built new buildings. There wasn't really any additional green space. But in 1986, as the result of that campus master plan that was all about restoring those green spaces and getting parking where it belongs on the periphery of the campus, making the campus more pedestrian friendly. You can start to see the shift from some of that gold moving off the campus farther off to the edges. The blue indicates parking garages, by the way, I forgot to mention that. By 2003, more of that parking moving. Look where it's all going, down to the South Campus. And onto the very north side of the stadium or out into the university residences of the south even of the South Academic Campus. By 2012, this is where we are today. Look how much of that gold has moved out of the academic core onto the edges. I took it one step further and said, okay, well that's nice, but I want to see how it compares with parking and green space. So again, 1942, parking on the left now, green space on the right. Then fast forward to 73, a complete loss of really most green space on campus. And again, worse in 1983. And then the reversal begins in 1993. You can start seeing more green space just with the Purdue Mall project and Founders Park being completed by then. Then Academy Park finished up. And then by 2012, look at the contrast. It's unbelievable. And just to kind of fast forward it, again, 42 to 73 to today. So we have come a long, long way from spaces that look like this to spaces that look like this. So thank you very much.
So we'll roll some slides now while we collect questions from you. And some folks are going to be coming around. There's Lisa in motion. And she's recruiting help. So if you have questions, just sort of hang them in the air. Thank you. Put a little star on that one. You might not be sitting in a reserved space, but we know who you are. All right. Any more? Oh, there's another one coming. To make sure I can read them all. All right. Okay, so do you see any potential, and this could be both of you answering this, for parking structures to provide other functions? For example, urban vertical gardens, rooftop gardens, or other functions?
Well, we certainly have been doing it for many years. We've done, for one university, we put all their playing fields for the intramurals on top of a garage. We've put swimming pools on top of garages. We've put many different uses. I kind of laugh when all the urban planners now say, oh, we got to put retail at grade. You know, that second garage, the one with the kind of vertical things, that was designed for retail at grade, and the city never got close enough to actually support it, but it was designed to put retail at grade. So, you know, we've always looked at that, but there's certainly a lot more happening now with, occasionally we'll do a garage where they built a whole nother floor and put an urban garden on top. We've done that in a couple of projects. So yes, that is absolutely happening.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think that's something I'd love to see happen. I'm not sure we could afford it, but it would certainly be something we would, personally, I would love to see us make better use of the top levels of our garages. It's no different than green roofs that we're trying to do on more and more buildings on campus as well.
The rooftop golf tees weren't very successful, it turns out. So this is an interesting question. So Mary, listening to John's presentation, what else could Purdue be doing? What could we be doing differently?
Watch what you say.
Well, I'm going to be honest.
I'm trying to start a fight.
No, I'm going to be honest and say the number one thing you can do is pay more for parking, because really that's the most green thing that you could do with respect to parking is to pay more for it. We really need in this country to begin to understand the cost of parking and use that in our mode decisions. And right now, the low prices, whether it's at a shopping center that has free parking or anywhere else, I mean, every project I do, I try to talk them into doing what's called unbundling, which means when you live in an apartment building, you would pay a separate line item, same amount of total rent, but you'd have a separate line item that says, this is what my parking costs every month, so that people understand in their head what parking costs. And to me, that's the number one thing the campus could do.
So I'm gonna take the next question, which will let John respond to that to some extent. So costing parking to encourage wiser mode use suggests that users have options. So presumably part of the question is, what are those options and how are those options being improved? And there's a sub-question, which is, and how does that change in winter?
Sure, good question. Well, I think there are options. Right now, city bus is an excellent option. I'm sorry? Okay. Well, let me just say what I'll say, and then you guys can dispute it. I would say, even if you live in Lafayette, to me, I live in Lafayette, and I can take the trolley and do on occasion. It's very convenient if you live anywhere in the vicinity of the downtown area. There are other things that I think the university has talked about. We went through a whole transportation demand management study a couple of years ago, and there were a whole bunch of wild ideas, some of them wild, some of them great, and some I think that we're going to eventually have to look at. But whether we can afford these things or not is another question. But there's always been the discussion of, can we take advantage of parking that exists already in the community, provide bus service to that lot, allow that lot to become the parking instead of providing it on campus, and then maybe we have another bus, a rapid transit that runs right from that lot directly to campus that would encourage more folks to park remotely, literally remotely, elsewhere on campus and then come into campus. That's one possibility. I think the other thing is for us to continue what we're trying to do with the enhancement of bicycle circulation. I know people say in the winter that that's unreasonable and impractical, but if you look at some of our peer institutions, and one in particular, the University of Wisconsin, Madison, it's in a climate much colder than here, and there is, I think, something on the order of 15 to 20% of their faculty, staff, and students use the bicycle as their primary means of transportation year-round. So it's possible, especially if the winters continue to be mild like they have been, but we'll see. So I think that's at least an attempt at trying to answer that question.
Did you want to try and follow up?
It is complex.
Let me ask you.
But so is providing parking at a cost that doesn't make it sustainable, and the cost to the environment, the cost to the use of our resources, as the state resources for the university keep diminishing, it's more and more difficult, I think, for us to justify subsidizing parking the way that we do. Alan and Holly are looking at one. Well, these are all discussions that we're going to have, and I am certainly not the person who will make that decision. I'm the big picture thinker, idea person, and so I certainly have to work with others who are much more grounded, fortunately. Alan Leonard is here, Holly Alexander is here. They both deal with these parking issues on a regular basis, and I don't know that I can't imagine we're going to make any rash decisions with regard to those kinds of things. This is just where we are. We're simply saying parking right now has to be subsidized every year. And I don't even want to really get into the whole financial thing because that's not my area. That's what Holly and I think Alan would be better suited to talk about. But maybe you could talk with them afterwards at the reception if they're willing to stick around.
Okay, so we'll take a light question. So I did get although I told you not to ask, somebody did. So what was the penalty for violating the parking in Nineveh on the processional road? Actually, we knew someone would go ahead and ask. So the answer is impalement. Makes the $250 parking ticket not look so bad anymore. Okay, so I have a question for Mary. What are some of your observations about parking in other parts of the world?
Well, I brought a couple of slides on that. Because I just didn't have time to cover everything, so they're kind of backup slides. Can you show those?
I think I can. Is it this one? It is, and in fact, we're in China already.
There's a lot of things going on in the world. My company just signed a huge contract to do 100 parking garages in China with one of the regional governments. And while they are trying the best they can to deal with things as green and as sustainably as they can, they simply can't keep up with it. The first garage was built in China in 1989, And today there are, they expect by 2015 that there will be 6 million cars in Beijing. They are registering about 20,000 new cars a month in Beijing, and that's even with severe restrictions on it. And they have even odd days where only even cars can drive, and odd days license plate numbers and things. But what's happened in Beijing then is that people just park all over the place. They park on sidewalks, they just park everywhere. And so what was normally intended to be an aisle or a park, they're parking on a sidewalk they're parking on. And they really are having extreme difficulty controlling this. And the other interesting place I'm working in right now is Egypt. And the drivers in Egypt are absolutely insane. That this freeway in the upper left actually is striped for 3 lanes, and they're driving 4 lanes across. And you notice that there's barely a couple of inches between the mirrors, and they drive down the roadways like this for miles. And then the upper right is a parking lot in which it is so congested that you can't even drive down the aisle to get out of the parking lot. And as you're driving around Cairo, then there'll be the donkey carts driving around in the middle of things. And the problem for parking is, how do we deal with a population that pays no attention whatsoever to signs, to pavement markings? And how do we figure out how to make a parking garage work the way we intend when they won't pay any attention to what we tell them to do? So we're trying to deal with some of those issues in that particular project in Egypt. Just another minor one, in Egypt and also in Turkey, we have to do a security inspection on the vehicle before it enters the parking. And that means they walk a bomb dog around it, and they pop the trunk. And instead of having, for one particular circumstance, 4 lanes, we have to have 12 lanes of security inspections, because it so slows down the operation of getting into the garage. For the same number, we would have 4 lanes of ticket dispensers. So it's really, there's really some challenges, and there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences. So it's really been fun to kind of adapt to those changes.
Wow. Do they pay attention to the one sign that you have in the photo, the parking for Egyptians only?
I saw that, I thought it was pretty funny, so.
Interesting, it's in English.
Yes.
Okay, so you've already spoken a little bit about this, John, but someone wanted a little more information about how can parking encourage more bike commuting?
How can parking encourage more bike commuting, or how
can Purdue encourage more bike commuting? I'm just winging it here.
Well, I think if we continue with the development of trying to provide more connectedness with our existing trails, nobody believes me when I tell them this, but we have already a huge surplus of bicycle parking areas on campus. The key is trying to get it where people want to park. And bicyclists also, I think, tend to feel that that parking for them is different than parking for a car, where a person in a car knows that they can really only park, contrary to what maybe they do in Egypt. People tend not to just pull up on a sidewalk and park. Bicyclists, on the other hand, have that mindset, that they can just do that. And so we try to strategically locate parking where it doesn't force people to violate the university's guidelines, which are that you don't ride a bike on a sidewalk. I know that's a nightmare scenario, but so we strive to provide adequate parking. We know we have a handful of spaces where there's not adequate parking in areas, but we also just don't have the physical space in some cases to provide the parking that's necessary. But honestly, we do bicycle counts twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring. And we always have a surplus of bicycle parking areas. So I think we're good in that regard. The bicycle trail system needs improvement. We know that. We're going to be installing this spring a series of sharrows. If anybody knows what those are, they're arrows that are basically marked to say share the road with the bicycle, to educate both bicyclists and vehicles that you need to share the road. We'll be putting those in key drives around campus to try to let bicyclists know that although the bike trail ends here, follow this and you'll get to another bike path. And then I think the other thing that we can do is try to make bicycling, put that on the same priority of same level of interest as we put vehicles right now. You know, even if it's nothing more than on the web page, that we address bicycle issues and vehicle issues on the same level, because I think bicycles are a solution for us with regard to parking, even though they do pose problems as well with regard to pedestrians. Education is key. Education and enforcement. I always tell people it's a three-legged stool. We can provide all the facilities and all the infrastructure we want, but if there isn't some way to enforce people, to enforce the rules and to educate people about the rules, it's going to fall flat.
You may. Yeah. Yeah, the question was about, is there any concept or idea about implementing a ride-share program, which, you know, Purdue tried several years ago, wasn't terribly successful, but things have changed a lot. There are now companies that actually provide that service where you just swipe a card, you take it, and then you get that back when you park it at the next destination. So I think that's definitely coming at some point in the future. It's one of the things that was identified in the Transportation Demand Management Study as a way to try to reduce the number of vehicles on campus as well. Let's provide better services for bikes. Thanks for bringing that up. So I think with a final question that really ties things together in the way that we like to do in this colloquium. Again, this I think will cross over between the two of you. So, Mary, you started out as a parking designer, but today both of you really seem like you're about designing experiences, ways of living, for example. And so what guidance would you give to how to prepare future engineers for dealing with this kind of complexity? Go.
Well, working in the global environment, and you really have to going forward. They value expertise, so you have to get a background before you can go over and consult globally, because what they value is our expertise. But you have to be able to be a strategic thinker and listen and react. For example, when they first started talking about those security lanes, I had to think in my head, now what implication is that, and ask the right questions and work with them to ferret out the information, to figure out how to solve it. And so that's the kind of thing that engineers are generally good at, is problem solving. But having a little bit broader discipline, I did interdisciplinary engineering so that I wouldn't have to take 3 more courses in sewers over in civil engineering. And instead...
The truth comes out.
Yeah. And instead so that I could take urban planning, and I took a course in architecture that happened to be in the landscape architecture department because we don't have an architecture school here. And I took some courses in history of architecture, and I took some urban planning courses. And so by rounding myself out, I never would have thought when I was here I was going to end up in parking, but it so perfectly suited what my skills are and what my thirst for knowledge is. So this was a perfect thing for me.
And I would agree with everything Mary said, that I think the thing that would be most beneficial to any engineering student would be to collaborate with those outside of engineering, to find how other people think, the people who aren't maybe the analytical types, try to figure out what they're trying to say and how you can interpret that and incorporate those ideas and suggestions into the designs that you all will be doing.
Well, and I think everything you said about the three-legged stool, right, really gets to that, right? The idea of being able to talk to the people who are designing policy, designing enforcement, and so forth, making sure that everyone's at the table. So I'd like to thank Mary Smith and John Collier for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to thank all of you for taking part as well. It's been our pleasure to host you. You're all welcome to continue the conversation at the reception over there. Food and drink are available. Thank you very much.